But let's first talk about politics. I predicted in the World Affairs Brief long ago that they would not really want Hillary Clinton to be president. I mean, she looks like a slam dunk, but she's not. Hillary Clinton has a very difficult time being popular even with the Democrats. And that's why Bernie Sanders is so, the hardcore Democrats really want a hardcore socialist. Hillary Clinton is, a globalist puppet. And so she'll bend with the waves, and so she doesn't really have a good, strong reputation even with the hardcore Democrats. But the powers that be know that Hillary Clinton will actually try to run the White House if she gets in. She is a real dominant woman. And she's got a lot of skeletons in her closets as well. But they really want a compliant puppet. They'd just as soon have Barack Obama watching his sports shows on television until they call him to read his script, and that's why he needs a teleprompter so often. But Hillary Clinton would really try to run the White House, and they'd have to control her, and that's a problem. And so they're going to give you a controlled Republican, but then comes Donald Trump. And Donald Trump was promoted by the establishment at the beginning. Do you notice how much press that they gave him? And you thought, what are they doing? Why are they giving Donald Trump so much press? It's because they knew that he was a wild card, that he would make so many outlandish statements that they could then sit there and poke fun at him and take pot shots at Donald Trump and discredit everything that he says. So when he mentioned that Mexico is deliberately sending all of these illegal aliens across the border, I mean, he was wrong. He overstepped the mark. It isn't that they're deliberately, but they are certainly facilitating. There's a difference. He couldn't prove his point, and they bashed him over it. But in fact, Mexico is not doing anything to shut this down. If Mexico wanted to stop the illegal aliens across the border, you know how easy that would be? You simply send a lot of people claiming to be refugees to the coyotes, the people who take people across the border, offer them money and then arrest them. They can't resist. The same thing with the boats in Turkey and Greece and all along the coast. These derelict boats taking refugees. You just pose to be a refugee. Here's your money. You're under arrest. It would take you no longer than a month to shut down every coyote, every boat traveling to Europe with refugees if you decided to do a sting operation. There is not a government in the world that's trying to stop this illegal immigration, despite giving Turkey $3 billion this week, supposedly to stem the flow. It's a payoff, ladies and gentlemen. It isn't going to stem the flow at all. So, Donald Trump, after about 2 weeks of Donald Trump, and they denigrated his immigration position, he denigrated his taxation position, every position he took, they just crucified him. And then they decided to take him down. 2 weeks is enough. And so they started to publish hit pieces on Donald Trump. And his popularity rose. They had not anticipated that the Republicans, at least the conservative wing of the Republican Party, had learned their lesson after John McCain. Remember the manipulation of 2008? They tried to foist Rudolph Giuliani on you conservatives, didn't they? Cross-dressing, person who was intimately involved with the government operation of 9/11, including not warning the firefighters when he himself was warned to get out that the buildings were coming down. Firefighters in New York hate him. But I knew the day that Time magazine put him on the cover as America's mayor, Time magazine's Man of the Year, that they were going to run him for president. Sure enough, they ran him for president, but the conservatives weren't buying it. He bombed in Iowa, and who was second place? I mean, in other words, they were promoting him as the front runner, and Mitt Romney, self-financed, was coming along right behind his second place. So when Giuliani bombed with about 5% in the Iowa primary, suddenly that looked like who was going to rise to the top position, Mitt Romney, which they couldn't have. And so 6 Democratic newspapers came out on the same weekend and endorsed John McCain. He had a 2% rating in Iowa. And after 6 Democratic newspapers endorsed him and all the media said, oh, we have a new front runner, all of a sudden he was up to 13%, if you can believe the polls. But nevertheless, he rode that all the way to victory, and that's how we got John McCain. It was pure manipulation. Now, you notice in 2012 when Mitt Romney was running. Now, even though Mitt Romney was bending over backwards to please the establishment, hiring every CFR advisor he could, taking every neocon position. He would have sold out every conservative cause because he wanted to be president more than anything, including his principles. Now, that may be hard words for you to hear who are Romney fans, but I'll tell you, Romney just endorsed Chris Christie, one of the most prominent establishment sellout artists with a list of skeletons in his closet a mile long. Romney doesn't have a clue who's running this nation and about conspiracy. But he would, if he were president, he would try to convince every one of you that his compromises were the right thing to do. And with fervor, unfortunately, most Utahns would go along with it. So he corrupts our own constituency. That's the danger of having an ignoramus conservative for president. Now, they tried very hard to stop Mitt Romney. Remember the surges that occurred? There were 5 candidates that surged suddenly out of nothing, and they came up to 20%. And then there was another surge, and he was up 20%. And then the primary would come along, and he would be down in the 5%. And they'd surge somebody else. They surged Rick Santorum twice. This was pure political manipulation. So by the time 2016 comes around, the conservatives and the Republicans, the Tea Party, have decided, one, you can't trust the media. Anyone the media hates has got to be a good guy. And so whenever they attack Donald Trump, all of a sudden his popularity goes up. They don't trust John Boehner as a leader of the House, and so you get rid of him. And then the establishment gives you Paul Ryan, and now we don't trust Paul Ryan because the establishment supports him. And you're correct not to trust Paul Ryan. Now, he's capable of selling himself because he has the cherubic looks, just like George Bush does. But anybody the establishment supports, you shouldn't support. And that's the way that this whole primary is operating now. And so you have 2 outsiders, Ben Carson and Donald Trump, and that's why they refuse to go down no matter how much they're attacked. It doesn't matter if Ben Carson fibbed about his background. It doesn't matter what Trump says or what errors that he makes. Because he is fighting and putting it in your face to the establishment, he is rising in popularity. Now, they have a plan to take down Donald Trump, but you're going to have to wait for the primaries to see it. And it's a little bit complicated, but here's what it involves. First of all, when you look at the actual delegates who will elect the president in the Republican primary, 1,200 of those delegates come from blue states, liberal states. So the delegates will be liberals. They're going to vote for establishment candidates. Doesn't matter what the conservative rank and file votes in the primaries, the delegates that go to the convention are going to vote for an establishment candidate. The red state primary delegates number 1,100. So at the convention, they're already outnumbered, aren't they? Well, here's the plan. And this is why you have people like John Kasich of New York, who's a real liberal Republican, running in the contest. Because, you see, they're hoping that some of these liberals will win some primaries. Chris Christie, for example, is putting all of his money on New Hampshire. Now, right now he's running about 3.5% in the polls in New Hampshire. But they pulled a John McCain in behalf of Chris Christie. The New Hampshire Union leader just came out and endorsed Chris Christie. This is the same game they played with. They're trying to influence through the media, which is controlled, to make sure that Chris Christie wins New Hampshire. Anybody who wins Iowa, New Hampshire has a good chance, over a 50% chance, of having a snowball effect of going forward. Now, this may not work because, remember, the conservative voters in these primaries are adamant we're not going to have anybody who's an establishment candidate. Now, you notice that after George Bush died on the vine, with about 5%, they're just not buying another George Bush. That's a compliment. That means you learned your lesson about George W. Bush. I'm sorry, Jeb Bush. So Jeb Bush dies on the vine, and what did they promote then? Marco Rubio. But Marco Rubio's just a real tenderfoot in terms of he's a newcomer to globalism. They just suborned him into globalism by inviting him to give speeches at the Brookings Institute and Carnegie Endowment, all the liberal globalist organizations. And sure enough, he gave neocon speeches right down the globalist point of view. And so he's their boy right now, but he's pretty inexperienced. And they fear that Marco Rubio isn't going to be able to hack it in a campaign, in a strong campaign. So they really want Bush or Christie. Christie's a very sophisticated speaker. I mean, here's a guy who's obese who can come along and still, you know, convince conservatives that I'm thin, even though he's obese. I mean, he's that good of a speaker. I mean, how do you get elected in a Democratic state like New Jersey without compromising? But he tells a good story when he's up there in front of the people. I mean, he's a rabble-rouser of a speaker. And I think that's why they're going to push Christie, even though he's got a low ranking right now. But the way that the convention is set is that all of the conventions before March 15th you're going to get proportional representation, meaning it's not winner take all, and that's what the Republicans used to want. It was winner take all so that they could get their candidate moving early and nobody else could get a foothold because it was winner take all. But now that they know that the establishment candidates are unpopular, they've made the first 4 or 5 primaries proportional. It means you get to keep a proportion of your delegates. So if Christie wins a certain proportion in this state and a certain proportion, that will add up and help him when they pull, after March 15th, all the primaries then became winner take all, including Florida. So that's what they're betting on. Get a start with Chris Christie. Then when winner take all starts up, hopefully they can get Marco Rubio to take Florida, John Kasich to take Ohio, and then at the convention, because of the new Republican rule, remember the establishment Republican switched and changed all these rules specifically to make sure that you, the conservatives, couldn't control the outcome. So what they say is that now, in order to be nominated for president, you've got to win 8 primaries. Well, nobody's going to win 8 primaries in the way that it's going. And so what there's going to be is a lot of horse trading, and that's why they put this system in, so that Kasich can then give his 34 delegates to Christie, and Rubio can give his to Bush or Christie, whoever the establishment's promoting. And all of a sudden they'll start to tally up all these votes that didn't belong to you, that you didn't vote for, but they're votes at the delegate level. And that's how I think they're going to give you an establishment Republican. And hopefully you won't go to sleep this time as you did with George W. Bush. You won't let him snooker you into the things that he did. But that's what they're planning in the political realm.